So hello, everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today on a discussion on building a better testing culture. And this will be a LeadDev webinar created in partnership with Sauce Labs. So this will take roughly 45 minutes. And after that, myself and the panelists will be on the LeadDev Slack to answer any leftover questions in the Effective Teams channel. So that's #effective-teams in the Slack. And we may also have time to answer a couple of questions live. So please submit your questions through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and then we'll get to them at the end. So feel free to add questions as people talk if those spark thoughts. And let's get started with some introductions. So my name is Amanda Sopkin, and today I'll be joined by Nishi Grover-Garg, Taizi Onofrio, and Marcus Morel to share their experiences and insights. And I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves. So please just talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're excited to be on the panel today, what you bring to this conversation about testing in general. And I'll pass it over to Nishi to kick us off.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nishi. I work as a technical learning and enablement manager currently at Alteryx. And I have a background in software testing. I've been a hands-on agile tester, and then I have been a corporate trainer, a product evangelist for test automation. And I've trained a bunch of people on different courses on testing, agile, DevOps, and such. And I'm absolutely passionate about testing. I'm still a tester at heart. And I've been to conversations, conferences, meetups, and that's why I'm passionate about talking about testing culture, how we can build it up, how we can act as an ally. So yeah, I'm absolutely excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Nishi. And next, I'll turn it over to you, Taizi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taizi. I'm a lead software engineer at Alteryx. I'm from Brazil. I'm very excited to be here because I believe a lot in the value of quality. As a software engineer, I think quality is everyone's responsibility. So it's very important to understand about it and know more about how we can improve the quality of the software we are building. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Taizi. And last but not least, Marcus, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So Marcus, I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm the Vice President of Technology Strategy for Sauce Labs, which basically just means that if there's a feature that we want inside of the offering that we have, we decide whether or not to build, buy, or partner to get that feature into our software to help our customers. I've been a tester for 20 years, a little over 20 years. Before that, worked in the video game industry for a little while. And I'm also part of the leadership team for the Selenium project, which was born out of ThoughtWorks with Simon Stewart, Jason Huggins, Brett Petticord, and a few other folks. So very honored to be here with a thought worker, Taizi. So super passionate about testing. I believe it is a craft and an art form rather than just a technical skill. And I've been trying to evangelize that point for 20 years. And this is another in a series with an amazing organization like LeadDev.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we should have a good spirited discussion today. So I'm going to kick things off. We'll talk a little bit about general testing methodology. And I'm going to start, I'll direct this one to you, Taizi. So there's a perception that traditional quality assurance jobs are disappearing. Is this the case at your company? Do you see a future where manual testing goes away?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say disappearing. I think there is a different definition about what a QA does. We don't expect a QA to just do manual tests or automated tests. A QA needs to be an advocate for quality within the team. So we need to be involved in all the process, like from planning stages, defining the architecture sometimes. So it's someone who is a champion and an advocate for quality within the team, and not just specific to a task or something like that. So I think this role is very much needed and definitely not disappearing.
Cool. Thanks. And I think we lost Marcus, so I think he'll be back in a minute. And follow-up question to that, how responsible should software engineers be for ensuring the quality of what they build?
Yeah, I think that it's everyone's responsibility. So software engineers are very much responsible as well for quality. And I think everyone needs to be involved in the process about when you are going to kick off a story, for example, as a software engineer, you need to take into consideration what you are going to test, how you are going to test it, and discuss that with your peers as well. And yeah, as much as possible, do test-driven development, which we can talk more about sometime soon. And yeah, just making sure that it's part of the whole process, the whole development process.
Cool. So I'm hearing you say it's a shared responsibility. It's something software engineers and quality assurance engineers are responsible for. Okay, awesome. This one is for Marcus. Do you think that companies should test separately for things like accessibility, performance, security? Should that be a separate testing process?
Ultimately, I don't think so. I think it should be woven throughout the SDLC, done in small stages at certain times, because just like the regular test pyramid for functional testing, unit integration, functional, I believe that there are bits of security, accessibility, performance testing that can be done early on. Like, if you're not doing it right now, doing it separately might be your only option. Doing it separately at the end, maybe with an outside firm or some specialized skill sets. But ultimately, I think that bringing in static analysis tools for the developers, bringing in unit testing tools and other kinds of things for the functional testing, integrating with a product like DQ, integrating that with your development process throughout. Those kinds of strategies can really help you get ahead of it, because the last thing anyone in the world wants is to find out 1 week from release that, oh yeah, we forgot to do security testing. Oh yeah, we need to do some security testing. Oh, there are 3 OWASP top 10 violations in this website or whatever web application, whatever we've got here. And there's nothing worse than that. It puts you at risk, and it makes it seem like you're being very reactive, not proactive, which in general is not a positive thing. So I think that ultimately, yes, but realistically, you got to start somewhere, but aim for doing it at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay. And I'm hearing you say it sounds like that should also be a shared responsibility at every stage of the software development lifecycle.
Yes, I believe so. We've got some diagrams about how this testing can be woven throughout the process, and it's not easy to do, but it is possible, and the tooling gets better every day. Oh, by the way, so do the hackers. They get better every day.
Got to be one step ahead. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm seeing sort of a theme emerging here about shared responsibility, which should be interesting when we talk about culture later on. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about automated testing, which is an important part of this topic in general. So this question will start with Nishi. Could you tell us a little bit about automatic testing versus manual testing? How much do you test, or should you test automatically versus manually?
Yeah, well, test automation is, in my opinion, a project of its own, which needs to basically get in sync with your development project. It definitely is a part of what we are doing, but to begin, we need to have a clear understanding of our custom approach, because not everybody's approach is going to be same, and there's no right or wrong approach to be taken with it. So the challenges that we face and hear about so much around, mostly centered around the themes like there's too much to automate, or automation is constantly lagging behind, or there are flaky scripts that fail too often, or ownership issues like who's going to automate, when are we going to do it. There's always a lack of time, and there's resources. So this is basically the theme, the issues that we face. But we can counter that by selecting an approach that fits our purpose and make it, build it up in such a way. Like, firstly, focus on the three main questions. Like, what are we going to automate? When are we going to automate? And how are we going to do it? So if you think about it, what are you going to automate? Not everybody is going to be able to automate 100%. And that's okay, because that depends on what your situation is. When we think about automation, there are different approaches. You can say, I want to only automate the sanity tests because I'm a beginner, I'm a small team, I don't have resources to automate everything, and that's okay. And that's where you start. Or you can also think about regression tests for automation, and that's one approach. Or there's another approach where we say selective automation framework, where we just pick, where we select the test to automate, and that selection is based on a criteria that can be different for everybody. Like, I want to automate only business critical parts, or my team only has time to automate tests that run against multiple configurations, but everything else we can just do manually. And that's okay. So basically, it's a pick and choose thing, as long as we all agree and there's a one approach of what we are going to automate. And if we are going to go for max automation, like let's aim for 100% automation, that's wonderful, and let's do that. And maybe keep leverage for technically unfeasible scenarios or things that don't make sense, but that's what to automate. And the second thing after that is, when do we do it? So there's different approaches you can take there. Like, I want to automate at the end of the release. Maybe I'm still a waterfall team and everything goes one by one. Or maybe my project is just a couple of weeks and we want to have a short hotfix release, and we don't have time to automate within that time, and we'll just automate by the end of the 2-week cycle. And that's okay. Or we have a longer project, but we are agile and we are work in sprints, and we want to pick up sprint automation approach, where we take the N-1 approach. So this is a very popular term. We work in the current sprint that we call as sprint N, and we automate tests that we built in the last sprint, N-1. So that means we deliberately make a conscious decision to automate one step behind, and that lag is conscious. There could be multiple reasons for it, like the team decides why they want to do that, but that's a very feasible approach, and it works for many teams actually. Or the best one could be, yes, let's automate continuously in sprint automation. And we have, roles and responsibilities tied to people who are responsible for automation as they build new tests. So there you go with, multiple approaches of when to automate. And the last one is, how do we automate? We can, assign this to a person, like an expert, automation expert within the team, or there could be a shared automation expert person who is shared across multiple teams, and they divide their time to different teams and helps everyone, create their tests. Or it could be an all hands approach. Like, we could have, we need to have sort of a infrastructure or a framework around it, but we could have everybody, even from BAs to developers or testers, everybody contributes and builds up the automation framework as we go. So basically, I think with automation, it's not about a right approach, but a mix and match of all of these to pick your actual custom approach. And if you find that sweet spot, you can tackle most of the common challenges that your team is facing.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm also hearing you say that it's definitely not a one size approach. You have to do an independent analysis based on all these factors that you talked about. Do you recommend that people sit down and kind of define this philosophy at the beginning when they're thinking about what their automation strategy might look like?
Yes, absolutely. And if you list it out, actually, you can pick and choose and make your own, dessert out of it. So let's say from what to automate, I pick regression averse automation. So I only want to automate regression. From when to automate, let's say I pick the sprint N-1 approach. And from how to automate, I pick, well, I don't have many people in my team, so I'll pick a shared automation expert, maybe hire one person, and that's it. So if you put all these three together, I have the answer to what, when, and how. And if I go back to all my challenges, like I don't know who will automate, I'm short on time, I don't know why my scripts are failing, right? So all of these challenges, if you look at it, you will find an answer somewhere in this approach, and you will have better clarity to your project. So even if you didn't do at the beginning of the project, I would still recommend everybody to sit down right now and maybe find out what is your automation strategy from all these approaches.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to direct this one to Marcus next to weigh in about automated testing. Marcus, what trends do you see in this field of automated testing in general?
Generally in the 20-year career I've spent and the 4 years I've spent with Sauce Labs customers, I think the top trend that I see is struggle, a lot of struggle, difficulty. And I think part of it comes from a little bit of what Nishi's talking about around how to prioritize. And I can sort of combine my answer with the question from Jakob, I believe it's Jakob Gerstmeyer, who posted a question about how can we get developers to take tests seriously? How can we keep them from being deprioritized? And I think that this goes to this sort of a theory that I'm developing, it's hopefully going to become a white paper where we talk about the concept of coverage versus the concept of risk, and how well they play with each other. We tend to think of organizations as being on a spectrum from coverage to risk. If I care about coverage a lot, it means that I have all the resources and everything I need, or I think I do, in order to be able to say my testing is good, I have everything covered, everything no problem. But in my experience, it runs the risk of failing to consider what are the most important things I need to test. Start with those first. The way I would approach this, and the trend I would like to see developing, but haven't seen yet, is make yourself absolutely indispensable by automating I'm going to say 10 most important things that are possible, especially ones that you tend to see fail. And make sure that those tests are indispensable and act as sort of a gatekeep in order to say that my software is good or my software is bad. Find the most important flows possible. If you're doing e-commerce, make sure that your cart checkout flow from product search to add to cart to checkout is all solid, and make sure that that is automated at every build. And when something goes wrong, so you have 100% coverage in the systems that you have control over, but for the systems that you rely upon, whether it's external companies like PayPal or Zelle or some sort of API that you're interacting with, or even another team whose microservice you depend on, you can't cover 100% of that. You can only cover your system's interaction with that. So all you can do is mitigate and identify risk with what happens if this goes down. What happens if Zelle is unable to process? What happens if the API contract from this other internal team is broken and my app hasn't been coded to go along with the new version of the API endpoint I'm trying to hit? So consider coverage for the things you can control, consider risk for the things you can't control. And then I've made a huge amount of success in my career by finding these kinds of processes early on and establishing a reputation with developers as being test stuff that's important. So I don't go to some terms and services that nobody looks at. I don't go to failure. I don't go to them with failures, that kind of stuff. You submit a bug, you move on. Bugs to developers that are critical that they would not have found outside of automation, and then bring that to them first and foremost. And at some point, when your builds run green all the time with your most important tests, I have seen this happen where when the build turns red, everyone pays attention because they know it's reliably going to be a failure that matters, that they can pounce on and actually pay attention to. So I guess ultimately people look at testing like they look at proofreading. Proofreading is supposed to be a very high energy, high intense exercise. And so is testing. You should be energetic and passionate about it, because when you start to find bugs and start to peel back layers, you start to get really excited about not only your skill set growing, but your ability to uncover the most important risks. And thank God I found this and not one of my users. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like that analogy to proofreading. I've definitely worked at companies where it's treated more like this kind of like final hurdle that you have to pass before releasing code, rather than something that you're all proactively working on and excited about. Yeah,
That's how it becomes siloed, and you don't have a good relationship with developers. So yeah,
and some themes there similar to what Nishi said about starting at the very beginning and defining the priorities, the most important things that you need to test depending on risk. Cool. Taizi, I'm curious what you think about this kind of automated versus manual testing strategy in general. Let's start there.
Yeah, I think this goes a lot with what Marcus was saying, identifying what's most important, and that should be automated first. Because then you can be sure that everything is working as expected. And if there is a failure, that's because something actually happened and you need to fix that. So yeah, we want to definitely to automate as much as possible. We know that that's not always the case, but definitely we need to prioritize what makes more sense. And also, I think as Nishi was saying about being able to start from the beginning already with, a plan. I think that's very important, but also to be able to review that constantly because your priorities might change. There is some context that might have changed as well. So I think you need to be constantly looking into that again and making sure that you are still prioritizing what makes more sense when you are talking about your test strategy as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Nishi, I'm curious, do you have thoughts on that, like kind of prioritizing as things shift over time?
Yes, absolutely. And we need to keep revisiting the strategy that we take up. And depending on what kind of failures we find most often, what kind of problems the team faces more often, the testers as, as a team, as individuals have to step up and, get the team back on track. So basically testers have to act more like as an ally, so that the traditional mindset of testers being testing these being looked at as an opposing party of sorts is something we can counter with this kind of mindset, because I am an ally. I want to participate more in what you are doing, and I'm a part of this process of development of this creation of this wonderful software that we are doing. So we need to participate at every step. Plan your tests, participate in design discussions, like just Marcus was saying, be excited and be that person that brings that kind of excited energy into the team. Share what you have, like share your value, and you can do that by little things like plan your tests, but don't keep it to yourself. Share it with everybody. Keep developers in loop, keep the BAs in loop, so that they look at your tests even before you start testing, and then they can be aware of what you're going to do with the software, and they can actually plan for those things. And you won't find those obvious bugs in the software then, right? Because they know what you're going to do, and you are challenged to go beyond, right? And the things like buddy testing. So this is what we used to do. I have done that with my developers. I would buddy test and plan to test the informal build that's not really passed on for testing, but sit together and see how can we find things that are most valuable, just like Marcus just said, like most valuable paths. And if you can locate those problems right now, even before it's you are officially into testing, it saves time, effort, and actually builds quality into the product at that time. It's basically getting hammered in. So you can also do other things like help verify other things beyond software, documentation, installation files, configuration files. All of that is part of software. All of that is everybody's responsibility. And by doing these small actions, you are making yourself part of every process. You are making yourself indispensable. And all of this will come only if you are energetic, you are vocal, you are transparent. So basically, you are helping the team build quality at every step of the way.
Yeah, I love this idea of creating kind of like an active and enthusiastic culture around testing rather than this kind of like standoffish, combative pattern.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, there's a question from Tom about automated testing that I wanted to pose to the group. When it comes to automated testing, should engineering leaders look to use off-the-shelf commercial tooling or build their own systems using open source tools? So kind of a specific technical question here. Let's see, maybe Marcus, do you have thoughts on that one?
I have thoughts, but they're a little bit self-serving for a non-vendor specific webinar. I definitely have thoughts around low-code testing and how I believe it's not quite ready for prime time. I don't know if we all would agree with that. I think that a lot of low-code, no-code testing software tends to be shelfware after a while, and I haven't really seen much to contradict that opinion. I'm sure there are successful implementations, but it falls a very narrow focus. I think that it is inevitably coming the day where scripted testing will start to be obviated by some of the tools. I just haven't seen evidence that we're close enough for you to bet your job on it.
Gotcha. Thanks. Okay, changing directions very slightly to talk a little bit about failure modes for testing. Taizi, could you talk a little bit about failure patterns in testing and what common mistakes look like?
Well, I think that thinking a little bit about the test pyramid, we usually want to try to have like the smaller tests, the ones that cost less. We can have a lot of them at the base, and then we can have, for example, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and have fewer of them because they cost more, take longer effort. That's the general thing, but it depends a lot on each application, on each context. But I think there is some cases of, like we can say about failure, that you can have like the contrary of that. So for example, if you have a lot of end-to-end tests and small amount of unit tests, it can be like very hard for developers as well, because the tests can fail all the time. And then you are like spending a lot of time trying to fix the tests, and they are not really meaningful. They are not really saying anything to you, and you are just spending time focusing on fixing tests instead of developing. So that's a pattern that we would want to avoid, and make sure to focus on your base first. So that's something that I've seen happening a lot sometimes.
Yeah, and this seems to go back to what Marcus and Nishi talked about, like prioritizing early on and really honing in on your priorities, what makes sense for your company and what stage you're at. Yeah, Marcus, do you have a story there that you want to share?
Yeah. I I once worked with a team of brilliant Ukrainian test automation engineers, and went on vacation for a couple of weeks and assigned them to work on a particular area of the product. And they produced something like 150 beautiful Selenium tests, engineered not to be flaky, like really, really well done. And I was having lunch with someone in business analytics when I got back from vacation, and I was bragging about the team. They're so productive. They did an amazing job. And I said, we just automated 150 tests around every really important flow in the profile editing page of the site that we were working on. And that person was like, that page sees those pages see less than 1% of the traffic and they produce zero revenue. Why in the world would you focus on that? And boy, lesson learned. I feel like my career changed that day. Why would we spend so much time on something that 1% of our users care about and produces no revenue? I mean, it comes back to risk and careful prioritization. And if we had 150 flaky tests testing something that nobody cared about, and those tests started to fail, people would continue not to care about them, and they would think that we were sloppy and unprofessional. So it works against you to do that much work in something that is so unimportant to the business.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great story. Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about testing strategy. I have a more specific question to start off with. Taizi, do you practice test-driven development? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I personally love TDD. I'm a big fan of it. I think that it can be a little hard for folks in the beginning when they haven't worked with TDD before to get to practice it and understand the value of it. But yeah, you can do dojos with your team. You can have a lot of pairing to start to get the value of it, and just being able to practice in general. And then when you start just seeing the results, it's like you don't want to stop doing that because it really helps you think about small steps and be oriented to those small goals when you are writing code. So you are confident in the code you are writing, and you can catch issues way earlier, instead of having to first, develop a whole feature and test it afterwards. And then if that fails, you need to go back and figure out what part of that failed. So when you do TDD, it's the other way around. We are able to right away figure out if something you did was not correct, or if you need to have a new use case or something like that. So you are able to see that pretty quickly. So yeah, I think TDD helps a lot to write better code, actually.
Yeah. And when you talk about starting in groups, sounds like it could be kind of like an experimental learning thing at first, and then people see the value of it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful in the teams I worked with, like doing dojos, or just we try to pair as much as possible as well. And that's really helpful when someone has experience in something and the other folks still don't. This way you can share the knowledge and everyone gets to learn in like a safe environment. And yeah, I think that's a really productive way of learning and getting the team up to the same skills.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, a common question that people have around testing. I'll start with Marcus here and then see if maybe Nishi has thoughts. Is it possible to make testing infrastructure so cumbersome that it's difficult to ship quickly? How do you find the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because there are a lot of tools out there to help you with managing test infrastructure. It's just that all of that work, all of it, is below the line. Below the line meaning it doesn't have an impact on your business. You're spending whatever time you spend on that is time spent not focusing on user experience, not focusing on customers. If you find yourself, and I've been in this position before, if you find yourself managing the virtual machines that are attached to a Selenium grid, or making sure that devices are available for a bunch of manual testers, and that they're clean and they're charged and the operating systems are updated, you just tend to. You could be working for any company at that point. Why are you working for your company? You could be working for anyone. The job you're doing is roughly interchangeable with the same job at a different place. To me, it just seems like if you went to work for this company for a reason, and you're a tester, then you are obligated to represent the user's interests back to your developers. And if you're getting out a virtual screwdriver and, updating a Windows VM image virtually with a virtual screwdriver, I don't know, then it sort of doesn't make sense, because at that point you have no connection to what your users are doing. You're doing operations that should be managed by someone or something else. So in my case, I would recommend you buy that. You don't build it.
Gotcha. Yeah, Nishi, I'm curious, do you have thoughts on that, on finding the balance there?
Absolutely. So I'm of the view that testers' time is precious. It's a valuable skill, and that time should be spent on actual testing. And when I say testing, I mostly focus on exploration, the exploratory part of testing, the creative aspects of testing, the wonderful things that testers can do, the make and break of quality that they can bring to the table. And absolutely, they don't need to be spending time on cumbersome infrastructure. Testing should be lightweight, it should be agile, and that if there's possible support you can get, do that. If you can get that support from your peers, do that. If you can find better ways and improved ways of doing, all these extra things, automate them, let them be handled elsewhere. And that's why automation is important, and that's why infrastructure automation is as important as well.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so we've got just a few minutes left. So I want to talk about our last topic, talk a little bit about testing culture. And there's a question that I think will be relevant in the Q&A about shifting left or pushing QA left. So if we can talk about that a little here, that'll fit well. So talking about testing culture in general, let's start with Taizi. Taizi, how do you communicate the value of testing to a company?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of metrics that can show this value as well. When you have a good quality strategy in place, you will have fewer issues in production. If there are issues, your mean time to resolve should be way quicker. So you are able to deliver value constantly. You're able to deploy to production all the time with confidence, because there is a good quality strategy in place. So I think that helps to see the value of that. And also as an engineer, I think that first off, you are writing code with a lot more confidence. You know, like that you can trust your code. But if you are seeing less issues in production, I think everyone is happy about that. Like no one wants to wake up in the middle of the night to solve an issue if you could have caught that issue with a test. So I think that's a very obvious way to see the value as an engineer. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So tying to things that people feel, like getting woken up in the middle of the night. Nishi, what do you recommend for testers to foster a better testing culture in general?
Well, I think as we discussed earlier, like be the ally that the team needs. Be the person, the go-to person for anything quality related. And that could be more than just, metrics like bugs in Jira, right? So we want to be the person that brings quality from every direction. You talk about design, you look at the mockups, you plan your tests, and then share them across. You help verify everything related to the builds, to the infrastructure. Basically, be more vocal about quality than just talking about bugs. Be transparent and collaborative with the team. And even if there's, we are talking about making a better culture for the testing team, but even if you see that that's not happening right now, be the change that you want to be, like you want to see, right? So you can bring that change by first changing your mindset, and then trying to make allies in developers, in product owners, in BAs, and then basically, eventually the change in mindset will come, and that will define the culture in your team.
Yeah, which is a great way to build your own value as well, like you talked about before. Cool. Marcus, do you have thoughts on positive signs of a testing culture, what that looks like, what that feels like?
I just, one of the things that I experienced early on in my career, and I think a lot of testers have experienced, is when you walk down the hall to deliver a bug report to a developer, they groan when they see you coming. And when I see that, that is toxic. And that means that you don't have a good relationship. You have an adversarial relationship. It means the developers are going to be defensive about whatever you come up with. They're going to tell you. I had one developer in 2003 or 2004 tell me, you found that bug on a virtual machine, therefore it's not valid. Go run it on a real machine and get back to me. And I was like, no, buy your time somewhere else. These are code paths we're talking about. This is not an operating system level memory management issue. So I would say, hold your own with confidence when you're dealing with developers. Also, really bring them the good stuff. Like, that's the easier said than done, but make sure that if you make sure that the stuff you're bringing to developers is relevant, and that you can, there's sort of no denying that there is a real issue there. And better yet, and the more you do this, also, the more it will help your skills in many ways. Find the problem inside the code. You have this capability. Either record the HTTP traffic that's going from the web page to the API, figure out what endpoint was called, where it failed, what the problem was, and then reproduce that using something like Postman, something along those lines, or even dive into the commit history of the code itself. These things are difficult to do, but you can do them. You absolutely can start to get in, and you should have permission to look at people's code. Otherwise, what are we all doing here? This is supposed to be a collaborative process, not adversarial. So when I see developers complaining about QA complaining about developers, that's, I think, a red flag. And as a manager, you should be routing to squash that and make sure that everyone owns quality, everyone's on the same team, and everyone understands what we're actually trying to solve here. What we're trying to solve here is not landing on page 2 of the Wall Street Journal. And as long as you're like focused on that kind of goal, that's the thing.
Yeah, and there's responsibility on both sides there, as well as from leadership, which I love that you said.
I mean, we always say everyone owns quality. It's become such a cliche now. Why don't we flip it? Say, well, everyone owns dev. We own dev too in testing. If we're not technical now, we could become technical.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to try and sneak in some Q&A questions, not QA. Here's one. There's one about test-driven development. So I'll pass this one to Taizi if you want to answer it. If you want to do test-driven development seriously, you find yourself writing a lot of low-priority tests. Would you say that test-driven development conflicts with the strategy of prioritizing test automation?
I think it really depends on what you consider. What was the word? I lost the question here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that my typing an answer was going to remove it.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, they said if you want to do test-driven development seriously, you find yourself writing a lot of low-priority tests. Would you say BD conflicts with the strategy of prioritizing test automation?
Yeah, I think what depends what you consider like a low-priority test, and also what does doing TDD seriously mean. I think like you need to do everything you need to do, like if you see value in that as well, just like doing 100% of code using TDD, and you just like, because you need to do that. But if you think something is not bringing value in that specific moment, I don't think you need to do that right away, So just always analyzing and prioritizing as well what makes sense. But yeah, we want to try to do TDD as much as possible because we see a lot of value in that. But I don't think it will be like 100% of you should always do that or should always do the other thing. It really depends on your context, on what a specific use case.
I have a question for you, Taizi, in this regard. Do you? So I exclusively have done TDD with unit testing in the past. Are you the same way, or do you do it with other kinds of testing as well?
Yeah, I usually do with unit tests. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of am of the opinion that there are almost no low priority unit tests. To me, all unit tests are all valid. I go for 100% coverage on unit tests. It's the higher level testing that I tend to talk about prioritization because they're hard to develop, they're hard to execute, they take a long time. That's where I start to prioritize it. On unit test level, I try to cover everything.
Yeah, so as it gets more expensive, you're prioritizing more ruthlessly. Makes
Curious
sense.
Nishi's thoughts as well.
Yes, absolutely. Because unit tests take too little time, effort, money. So let's do all of it. And the prioritization starts when the value has to be proven to actually get ROI out of it. That's what I believe.
Cool. Gonna try and sneak one last one in here really quick. Does anyone want to talk about shifting left, like this idea of moving testing earlier in the process? We can also move this to the Slack channel.
Yeah, I think just like a quick answer, I think it would be about feedback loop. We want to get feedback as soon as possible. And I think that relates a lot with shift left, because we want to get feedback in the very beginning, if possible, so we can solve things quicker. It's cheaper, it's quicker. So I think everyone is happy about that, basically. The sooner you can get feedback on your tests, the better.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're approaching the end of our time here. So thank you so much to the three of you for sharing your thoughts on testing strategy. I definitely learned a lot and learned a lot about what positive testing culture feels like and being basically not combative, which I've definitely had at previous companies. So thank you. We are going to move other questions to the Effective Teams channel. Feel free to jump in there if you had something that you didn't get to ask. And thank you so much. So please head over to Effective Teams to continue the discussion, and we hope to see you next time.